I was finally able to clear a pit level 140 with my Bleed Bash Barbarian, and in this video I'm going to share with you the skills, Paragon, gear, and information like rotation that I need you to know to get yourself in the position to be able to clear the exact same content. Let's go. What's so critical to explain is that in order for me to accomplish the 140 pit clear, it's very, very important that you have greater affix gear, and that's this stuff. That's stats like this. A sword is triple greater affix legendary. It's the highest you can get with regards to all greater affixes on the piece. So strength, life, crit. That is insane. Getting that is already difficult enough to do, but I want to set the expectation for you. If you want to make this Bleed Bash Barbarian, and you want to have a similar result, if you do not have greater affix gear like you're seeing on this character, you're not going to have the same success that I had. And I want to make that abundantly clear. Like on some gear I don't have it, but on others I do. And where I do have it, it's tremendously adding to my ability to clear where I wouldn't have that option otherwise. And I just want to make sure that you know that, because I don't want to be disingenuous with your expectations. If I didn't have this, I wouldn't be able to clear it. And the reason is, whenever you're running the pit content scales exponentially, but your gear does not. So the content becomes harder and harder and harder the higher up that you go, and ultimately you're going to hit that wall. In addition to the gear that I used, I have these elixirs. I ended up using Elixir of Holy Bolts and Elixir of Antivenin. And in Season 4, these two things do stack, but in Season 5, they no longer will. And then if I was on a boss where Holy Bolts wasn't a appropriate elixir, I would then recommend trying to use the Elixir of Precision to get increased critical strike chance and increased critical strike damage. And remember, because you're using the Grandfather, this critical strike damage will almost double up. As for the incense that we're using, you can use 3. If you read it, you're going to see it's a Type 3 incense, Type 2, and Type 1. You can have a singular incense of each type. So Chorus of War, Soothing Spices, and Ancient Times. When I put all these together with the character, this is what my stats look like to clear the 140. My attack speed was 44.3, my critical strike chance was 71.3, critical strike damage was 375.4, and my vulnerable damage is 407.9. Ideally, this is going to be 1 to 10 ratio, so for every 100 crit strike damage that I have 10 vulnerability. One of the tricky parts about the Barbarian is trying to get the defenses correct with your resistances. So for me in this build, I went in and cleared it with the following. Fire res was 82, Lightning res was 82, Cold 82, Shadow 82, and I decided to take the L on Poison res. And there's a reason for that. I can get a little bit more benefit out of Soothing Spices to go ahead and bring all my resistances up, but then Elixir of Antivenin, it tells me that it gives me 20 res, but it actually doesn't. It really only applies about 15% on the character. So going in and clearing the 140, my poison res was 51.5, which made me a little bit squishy to poison, but we got there anyway. To clear the 140, this is what the skill tree looked like. I put 5 points into Bash, 1 point into Enhanced Bash, 1 point into Combat Bash. In the core tree here, 1 point into Hammer of the Ancients, 1 point into Enhanced Hammer of the Ancients, and 1 point into Violent Hammer of the Ancients. Moving down into the defensive tree, I put 3 points into Imposing Presence with 3 points into Martial Vigor. I then put 1 point into Rallying Cry, 1 point into Enhanced Rallying Cry, and 1 point into Strategic Rallying Cry. 1 point then goes into Outburst, and 1 point goes into Tough as Nails. Challenging Shout was only 1 point, with 1 point to Enhanced Challenging Shout, and we don't go any further here. Moving down into the Brawling tree, 1 point into War Cry, 1 point to Enhanced War Cry, 1 point into Power War Cry. You then max out Booming Voice to increase the duration of all your shouts, with 1 point into Raid Leader to support Tyrael's Might. I then maxed out Aggressive Resistance to make sure that I had additional damage reduction while berserking. Moving down into the Weapon Mastery tree, you put 3 points into Pit Fighter, 1 point into No Mercy, and 3 points into Slaying Strike. I then put 1 point into Hamstring with 3 points into Cut to the Bone. We put 1 point into Steel Grasp, 1 point into Enhanced Steel Grasp, and 1 point into Fighter's Steel Grasp. I then put 1 point into Thick Skin with 3 points into Counteroffensive. Moving down into the Ultimate Skill tree, you're going to put all 3 points into Heavy Handed and 3 points into Wallop. Finally, for your key passive choice, you're going to choose Gushing Wounds. Okay, so let me show you the Paragon board and what I used to get the job done in the 140. Starting off with our starting board, it's going to be the Exploit Glyph. And once we've got Exploit Socket, we're going to move all the way up to our first board, which is going to be the Warbringer board. Inside Warbringer, we're going to be using the Ire Glyph. Once we've slotted that in, we're going to move on over to the right to the Carnage board. We're going to be choosing the Might Glyph. Once we've got that selected, navigate all the way up to your next board, which is going to be the Blood Rage board, utilizing the Martial Glyph. The importance of this board is right here, Blood Rage. You want to make sure on your character here that you can see it's the second option just above the defensive category in your character sheet. Damage while berserking. You want to make sure you have at least 300% because that will become 30% multiplicative damage on your character. So if your number isn't 30 here, or mine is, it's because your damage while berserking is not at least 300. And you can get that on your gear by assigning damage while berserking, typically on 2 pieces of gear, which would be on either one-handed sword or either ring. Once you've got that done, we're going to navigate on over to the next board, which is going to be the Decimator board. And the Decimator board, you're going to be choosing the Undaunted Glyph. From here, we're going to circle back all the way down to our Carnage board and connect from the bottom here. And on this board, we're going to be choosing the Bonebreaker board. Inside the Bonebreaker board, we're going to be assigning the Wrath Glyph. And finally, we kick on out over here and move into our final board, which is the Hemorrhage board. And currently, when I cleared this, I only had a multiplicative bonus of 46%. Your bleed damage is increased by 15% multiplicative of your vulnerable damage bonus. And you're trying to get this value up as high as you can. It becomes a balance of trying to get vulnerable damage and critical strike damage for your grandfather, and you're trying to balance those two numbers at a 10-to-1 ratio for maximum bleed damage. Okay, so let me show you what the skill rotation was that I was using to clear this. So based off of my stats, it's important that you look at yours because your stats might be higher than mine. I've only got attack speed bonus of 44.3. So what that means is whenever I'm doing the attacks, right, with this current setup, I basically get 11 attacks of Bash before I ever have to re-engage my Berserk. It's important that you monitor Berserk. So Berserk looks like this, right? I'm going to throw my Steel Grasp or Chains, and I throw out my characters on fire, okay? So that's kind of nice, but we don't start off with Chains. We weave Chains into our rotation as we go. So we get in there, we start hitting, and watch your Bash buff. You want to make sure that's 4, okay? Once Bash buff goes to 4, you're going to press Warcry, and that's when you're going to full send it. So you Warcry, and you start bashing. Count to 10, because you can get 11 at 44.3% attack speed. Once you get 10 swings in there, you're going to notice that your Berserk buff is gone. So you count to like 10 in your head, and then you throw Steel Grasp or Chains to maintain that Berserk, and these guys will always be vulnerable. That's what that skull is floating. That's a Cursed Touch, making sure that everything's kind of vulnerable, and it'll hit all the other targets as well. So here we go, right? So you get in there, you got your buff stack at 4, and Warcry, bang. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 Hoda Chains. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 Hoda Chains. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 Warcry Hoda, and that's it, okay? And then you're gonna, in addition to that base, you're going to start monitoring, like, you know, is there a lot of elites coming in? Are you chain pulling stuff to just stay alive? And if you're doing that, then you start to weave in like challenging shout to make sure that you take less damage from everything. And then you can make sure that you're not just popping your shouts, but rallying cries ready to go when you need to become unstoppable to break like a frost or a cold or a stun, and away you go. Okay? So again, your basic damage is you want to get that bash buff, excuse me, bush, lol. You want to get that bash buff to 4, and then you Warcry, and then you Hoda. And the reason is Berserk Ripping only applies damage over time, your bleeds, once you've dealt Berserk damage. And to be Berserked, we just use Warcry and Command. Or we can use Steel Grasp. Either one works, but you want to open with Warcry. It's just tremendous. And if you have Warcry in your boots, that's where you're getting the extra multiplicative damage. When I cleared it, mine was giving me 27% multiplicative because I have it on my boots. And that's +4 to Warcry there. If you made it to the end of the video, thank you so very much. I hope that you have the exact same amount of success that I had, if not even more so. Drop a comment below to let me know how it went for you. I always read them all, and I appreciate your feedback. In the description, by the way, will be a build guide that you can use. There's 2 variations. There's the pit-pushing Uber version and the Tormented Boss version with a slight deviation from Challenging Shout to Call of the Ancients to get you just a little bit more damage. And now that we've cleared the 140, which is the quest and the conquest for the Barbarian, I guess it's on to the next mission. Hardcore.